A highly detailed, realistic 3D render depicts a dramatic outdoor scene with two main figures, a human man and a small, non-human child. The man, appearing to be in his late 30s to early 40s, is kneeling slightly on a vibrant green lawn. He has short dark brown hair and a rugged appearance with a light brown skin tone. He has visible stubble and what appears to be dirt or minor abrasions, possibly blood streaks, on his right cheekbone and forehead, suggesting he might be distressed or has been in conflict. He is wearing a muted olive green or gray button-down shirt, partially unbuttoned at the neck, and dark pants that appear ripped at the knee. He is looking intently and with concern at the child. His hands are placed gently on the child's shoulders and arm. The child is an imaginative non-human figure resembling a young girl, perhaps around 6 to 8 years old in apparent stature. She has striking vibrant teal or turquoise skin and large wide eyes with dark pupils. Her long straight hair is a very pale, almost white or silver color. Her expression is one of fear, sadness, or bewilderment. There are streaks of what looks like dirt or reddish marks, similar to the man's, across her forehead and cheek. She is wearing a simple, tattered, rough brown sack dress. The setting is a sunny, suburban outdoor environment. The foreground is a well-maintained lawn with short, bright green grass. In the background, there is a neatly trimmed hedge and a mailbox on a post to the left. Behind the hedge, there is a 2-story house with a white window frame visible, suggesting a typical residential area. The lighting is bright and warm, characteristic of a sunny day with strong shadows and highlights enhancing the dramatic realism of the rendering. The overall atmosphere is one of intense emotional interaction and concern in a mundane setting. A fragile bond. The man carried the alien girl through the ruins until the sound of enemies faded far behind them. Only when he reached the safety of a small cave hidden in the hillside did he stop. The girl was still pressed against his chest, her arms gripping him tightly as if she feared he might vanish if she let go. He gently set her down on the rocky ground. She looked at him with wide, uncertain eyes. The shadows of the cave flickered in the dim moonlight, and the cold air carried their silence. For a long moment, neither spoke. The man finally broke the stillness. "You should sleep," he said quietly, though he doubted she understood. He gave her his old jacket, worn and patched, but warmer than nothing. She hesitated, then wrapped it around herself. He sat near the cave's entrance, keeping watch. His knife rested in his hand, his eyes scanning the dark outside. He had done this for years, watching, waiting, surviving. Yet tonight felt different. Behind him, a small life depended on him. He told himself it was temporary, just until he found a safe place to leave her. Still, the thought carried no comfort. The girl's soft breathing soon filled the cave. She had fallen asleep quickly, exhaustion winning over fear. The man looked back at her. In the pale light, she seemed fragile, too small for such a cruel world. Something in his chest tightened. He turned away and tried to silence the feeling. Morning came with the cries of distant birds. The man woke stiff from sitting against the wall. The girl was already awake, sitting quietly, her jacket pulled tight. She looked at him, then at his pack. He sighed. "Hungry again?" Her small head nodded slowly. He reached inside and pulled out dried meat. It was all he had left. She took it carefully, as if afraid he might change his mind. Watching her eat reminded him of his own daughter long ago, before the war, before everything had turned to ash. He shook the memory away. As the days passed, their fragile bond began to grow. At first, the girl followed him from a distance, staying a few steps behind, watching his every move. She was quiet, almost too quiet, her fear never leaving her. But little by little, she began to copy him. When he gathered wood, she brought twigs. When he drank from a stream, she cupped her small hands to sip too. One evening, after he built a small fire, she pointed at herself and spoke a word. It was soft, broken by her accent, but it was her name. He repeated it awkwardly, and her face lit up with a small smile. Then she pointed at him, waiting. The man hesitated. He had not spoken his name in years, but something in her eyes pushed him. "Daniel," he said finally. His voice was rough, as if the word had been buried too long. The girl repeated it, stumbling over the sound but proud of herself. For the first time, laughter echoed in the cave, light, innocent laughter that warmed the cold air. Daniel looked at her in surprise. He had almost forgotten what laughter sounded like. The bond grew stronger with each passing day. She began to trust him enough to sit closer, sometimes leaning against his side when the nights grew cold. He tried not to show it, but he never moved away. One night, while the fire burned low, she whispered something unexpected. Her words were broken, but he understood. "Call me your daughter." Daniel froze. He stared at her, unsure if he had heard correctly. She looked at him with those wide, glowing eyes full of hope. She repeated it again, slowly, with trembling lips. "Daughter. Meet you, father." The word struck him like a blade. Memories of his real daughter flashed before his eyes. Her laughter, her hand in his, the day he lost her. Pain rose in his chest, sharp and merciless. He turned away, unable to answer. The girl's face fell, but she did not cry. Instead, she lay down beside him and closed her eyes, whispering softly, "Father." Before sleep took her, Daniel sat in silence for a long time. He wanted to correct her, to tell her it was impossible, that he was not her father and never could be. But the words never left his lips. Something inside him was breaking, something he had locked away for years. The next day tested their fragile bond. While crossing an abandoned field, a wild beast lunged from the tall grass. Daniel shoved the girl behind him and drew his knife. The creature was fast, its teeth sharp and dripping with saliva. Daniel fought with all his strength, barely managing to wound it enough to make it flee. Breathing hard, he turned to see the girl clinging to his jacket, her eyes wide with terror. Tears streamed down her face as she cried, "Father! Father!" He froze again at the word, but this time he did not push it away. He knelt, holding her small shoulders, his voice firm. "You're safe. I won't let anything happen to you." The girl sobbed and buried her face against him. Daniel wrapped his arms around her, holding her close. For the first time, he did not feel like a wanderer. For the first time, he felt like something more. That night, as the fire crackled and the girl slept peacefully beside him, Daniel stared into the flames. The word father still echoed in his ears. He told himself it was only her fear, only her need for protection. Yet deep inside, he knew the truth. The fragile bond between them was no longer fragile. It was growing stronger with each breath, each step, each choice. And though he did not say it aloud, in his heart he already knew. She was becoming the daughter he had lost, and he was becoming the father she desperately needed. Struggles of survival. The days turned into weeks as Daniel and the alien girl traveled across the scarred lands. Survival was never easy. Every morning began with the same question. Would they live through the day, or would this be their last journey together? Food was scarce. Daniel hunted when he could, but his knife and a few traps were no match for the vast wilderness. Sometimes they went to sleep with nothing in their stomachs but cold water. Other times he gave her his share, telling her he wasn't hungry even though his empty stomach ached. The girl, small, fragile, but determined, began to learn. She watched him carefully, copying his every move. When he searched for roots, she knelt beside him, digging with her tiny hands. When he gathered firewood, she carried sticks almost too heavy for her. And when they crossed rivers or steep cliffs, she held his hand tightly, her trust in him unshaken. But the land was not just harsh. It was dangerous. One evening, they reached the edge of a ruined village. Daniel stopped, scanning the silent homes with broken walls and shattered windows. Smoke stains still marked the stones, a memory of destruction. The girl looked up at him, her voice soft. "Safe?" Daniel shook his head. "No place is safe." Still, he decided to risk entering. They needed food, and maybe there would be something left behind. Inside one of the houses, they found dried grain hidden in a cracked jar. The girl's eyes brightened as Daniel poured it into his bag. But before they could leave, the sound of footsteps echoed outside. Soldiers, enemy scouts. Daniel's heart raced. He grabbed the girl's hand and pulled her behind a broken wall. They crouched in the shadows, breath silent. Through the cracks, he saw armored figures pass by, their weapons gleaming. One soldier stopped, turning his head as if he sensed something. Daniel tightened his grip on the knife, ready to fight if discovered. The girl trembled, her small hand clutching his arm. She whispered one word, "Father." Her voice was soft, but to Daniel it was louder than thunder. It reminded him of the reason he had not abandoned her. Slowly, the soldiers moved on, disappearing into the ruins. Only when the silence returned did Daniel exhale. They left quickly, but the moment stayed in his mind. That word, father, was no longer just a mistake of language. It was her belief. And maybe, just maybe, it was becoming his truth too. The next trial came with the weather. A storm swept across the land, fierce winds tearing at their clothes and icy rain soaking their skin. They found shelter beneath an overturned transport vehicle, its metal sides rusted but strong enough to block the wind. The girl shivered, her small body curled against him. Daniel wrapped his arms around her, pulling his jacket over them both. He could feel her heartbeat against his chest, fast and frightened. "Will it stop?" she asked, her voice muffled. "Yes," he said firmly, though he wasn't sure. "Storms always stop." Hours passed. The storm raged on, and Daniel stayed awake, holding her close, whispering quiet words of comfort. He realized he wasn't lying to her anymore. He was promising. Promising that as long as he was alive, she would not be alone. The hardest struggle came not from nature or enemies, but from within. One night, after days of hunger, Daniel found himself staring at the last piece of food they had, half a loaf of stale bread. His body screamed for it, his stomach burning with emptiness. But when he looked at the girl, her face pale and tired, he placed the bread in her hands without a word. She hesitated, then broke it in half and offered it back to him. "Share," she said softly. Daniel felt a lump in his throat. He took the small piece she gave, not because he wanted it, but because refusing it would hurt her. For the first time, he realized she was not just surviving because of him. He was surviving because of her too. Their journey continued across rocky plains and dense forests. Each step tested them. Once, wild beasts cornered them, their yellow eyes glowing in the dark. Daniel fought fiercely, his knife flashing, while the girl hid behind a tree, whispering prayers to gods he did not know. When it was over, Daniel stood bloodied but alive, the beasts lying still on the ground. The girl ran to him, her hands shaking as she touched his wounds. "Father hurt?" He gave a tired smile. "Not enough to stop me." Her eyes filled with tears, but her voice was strong. "I help you," and she did. She cleaned his cuts with water from a stream, her small hands careful, her face serious. It was clumsy, but it mattered more than anything. One night, as they sat by the fire, the girl leaned against him and whispered, "I'm not alone." "You, Father." Daniel stared at the flames, the word burning in his heart. For so long he had been nothing but a shadow, a man with no purpose but survival. But now, because of her, he was something more. Still, he did not answer. Not yet. He only placed his hand gently on her shoulder, and she smiled, closing her eyes. That smile gave him strength greater than food, greater than rest. The struggles of survival did not end. They never would. But together, Daniel and the girl had begun to fight not just for life, but for something deeper, for family, for trust, for a bond strong enough to face the cruel world. And though Daniel would not admit it aloud, he already knew. Losing her was no longer an option. The question of family, the fire burned low in the small cave, its faint glow painting shadows on the walls. Daniel sat silently, sharpening his knife against a stone. The girl lay nearby, pretending to sleep, her breathing uneven. She had been quiet all evening, her usual shy questions missing. Something was troubling her. Finally, her small voice broke the silence. Why can't you be my father?" Daniel froze. The question cut deeper than any blade. Slowly, he looked at her. Her eyes were wide, shimmering with hope and fear, as if his answer could either heal or break her. He opened his mouth, but no words came. He had faced soldiers, beasts, and storms, yet this simple question left him powerless. Memories he had buried clawed their way back. The laughter of his real daughter the day he had lost her, the helplessness that had nearly destroyed him. "I can't," he whispered at last. The girl sat up, her small fists clenched. "Why, I try. I learn. I call you father. You protect me. You already are." Her voice trembled, her alien accent breaking the words, but her meaning was clear. Daniel turned away, staring into the fire. His heart ached, but his fear was stronger. "You don't understand. To be a father is to promise to never fail. And I failed once. I won't fail again." The girl's eyes filled with tears, but she did not cry out. Instead, she crawled closer, placing her small hand on his arm. "I not ask for perfect. I ask for you." Daniel closed his eyes, torn between past grief and present hope. He wanted to reach for her, to accept the bond she offered. But his guilt chained him. The next day, their silence was heavy. They walked side by side through a dense forest, the air damp with morning mist. Daniel kept his eyes on the path while the girl trailed behind, her usual chatter absent. As the sun rose higher, they came to a clearing. and danger found them again. A group of scavengers, rough men armed with crude weapons, stepped from the trees. Their leader grinned, showing broken teeth. "Well, look what we have here. A traveler, and his little prize." Daniel instantly stepped in front of the girl, his knife drawn. His voice was cold. "Walk away," the men laughed. "We'll take the girl. You can go if you want to live." Behind him, the girl gripped his jacket. Her voice shook, but her words were clear. "Father, don't leave me." The words struck Daniel like lightning. The scavengers laughed again, mocking. But for Daniel, it was not a joke. His fear melted into fire. He lunged forward, his blade flashing. The fight was brutal. Daniel moved with desperate strength, blocking blows, striking fast. One man fell, then another. The leader swung a club, striking Daniel's shoulder, but pain only fueled him. The girl screamed his name, but he did not stop. He fought as if her life and his promise depended on it. At last, the scavengers fled, dragging their wounded with them. Daniel stood, breathing hard, blood dripping from his arm. The girl rushed to him, tears streaming down her face. "You stayed. You fight for me. You are my father." Daniel dropped to one knee, gripping his wounded shoulder. He looked at her, truly looked at her. She was no longer just a frightened child. She was his responsibility, his reason to fight, his second chance, but still, fear whispered in his mind. Could he protect her forever? Could he carry the weight of being a father again? That night, as they rested in another cave, the girl curled beside him, her small hands clutching his sleeve even as she slept. Daniel stayed awake, staring at the stars through a crack in the rock. His thoughts battled each other. His past told him to stay distant, to never open his heart again. But his present told him another story. Every day she grew closer to him. Every day she believed in him more. Her voice echoed in his mind. "I not ask for perfect. I ask for you." Slowly he realized something. He had been wrong. Being a father was not about perfection. It was about presence, about choosing to stay, even when the world was cruel, about giving love even when fear screamed against it. And without noticing, he had already chosen. Every time he fought, every time he gave her food, every time he shielded her from danger, he had already been her father. The next morning, the girl woke to find him sitting at the cave's entrance. She sat beside him quietly, waiting. At last, Daniel spoke, his voice low but steady. "You asked why I can't be your father. The truth is, I don't know if I deserve it, but..." He looked at her, his eyes softening. "You deserve someone to try." Her eyes widened, tears filling them. Slowly, she reached out and took his hand. "Then, you are my father." Daniel did not correct her. For the first time, he let the word settle in his heart. He squeezed her hand gently, and she smiled through her tears. In that moment, the question of family was no longer a question. The bond they had forged in fire and struggle had become something unbreakable. Sacrifice and protection. The days of uneasy peace did not last. Danger always found them, and this time it came without warning. Daniel and the girl were crossing a narrow valley when the sound of weapons echoed through the air. A squad of enemy soldiers appeared on the ridges above, their armored suits gleaming in the sunlight. Trapped between steep cliffs, Daniel had nowhere to run. He grabbed the girl's hand. "Stay close." But the soldiers were already firing. Energy bolts ripped into the ground, exploding in bursts of smoke and stone. Daniel pulled her behind a boulder, shielding her with his body. The blast grew louder, closer. The girl trembled, clutching his jacket. "Father, we die?" Daniel's eyes narrowed. "Not if I can stop it." He looked around quickly. The valley was a death trap, but there was one chance. A small cave opening halfway up the cliff. If he could get her there, she might survive. But reaching it meant exposing himself to enemy fire. He knelt before her, his hands gripping her small shoulders. "Listen to me. When I say run, you run to that cave. Don't look back. Do you understand?" Her eyes filled with tears. She shook her head. "No, together!" His heart broke at her words. But he forced himself to stay firm. "You have to trust me. I promise to protect you." Before she could answer, a blast struck nearby, sending shards of rock flying. "Daniel made his choice. Run!" he shouted. He stood and drew the soldiers' attention, sprinting into the open. Energy bolts whizzed past him, some grazing his arm and leg, searing pain into his flesh. He ignored it, his focus only on keeping their fire away from the girl. The soldiers shouted, chasing him down the valley. Behind him, he saw the girl hesitate, then obey. She ran toward the cave, stumbling but determined. Daniel fought like a man possessed. With his knife and sheer fury, he struck down one soldier who came too close. He grabbed the fallen man's weapon and fired back, forcing the others to scatter. But there were too many. A bolt hit his side, burning through his jacket. He staggered but stayed standing. The girl reached the cave and turned back, screaming, "Father!" Daniel's chest tightened at the sound of her voice. He wanted to shout back to tell her to stay hidden, but another soldier rushed him. Daniel met the attack head-on, his blade clashing against steel. He fought with everything left in him, every strike fueled by the image of her safe in that cave. Another blast struck him, this time in the shoulder. He fell to one knee, blood dripping. The soldiers closed in, raising their weapons for the final shot. And then it happened. The girl, small and fragile, ran from the cave despite his orders. She threw herself in front of him, arms spread wide. "Stop, don't hurt my father." The soldiers froze, shocked by her cry. Daniel's heart stopped. Fear and rage surged through him like fire. He pushed himself up, ignoring the pain, and roared as he attacked. His knife slashed, his stolen weapon blazed. In his fury, he became unstoppable. The soldiers, unprepared for such ferocity, retreated. Some fell, others fled. The valley grew quiet again, filled only with the sound of Daniel's ragged breathing. He dropped to the ground, blood pouring from his wounds. The girl knelt beside him, sobbing. "Father, no. Don't leave me." He raised a trembling hand and touched her cheek. "I told you to stay safe," he whispered. "You safe too," she insisted, tears streaming down her face. She pressed her small hands against his wounds, desperate to stop the bleeding. "You can't go. You are my father. I need you." Her words gave him strength. Pain still burned through his body, but he forced himself to stay conscious. For her, always for her. They stayed hidden in the cave for hours. The girl refused to leave his side, tending to his wounds with clumsy but gentle hands. She tore strips from her own clothes to bandage him, whispering words of comfort in her broken voice. Daniel watched her through half-closed eyes. She was not just a child he had found. She was brave, stronger than he had ever expected. She had risked everything to protect him, just as he had for her. That night, as the fire flickered weakly in the cave, the girl lay beside him, holding his hand tightly. "Don't leave me, Father," she whispered before drifting into sleep. Daniel stared at the ceiling of the cave, his body aching but his heart alive. For so long he had resisted the word, resisted the bond, but now after this battle, after her sacrifice, he could no longer deny it. He squeezed her hand gently, whispering words he had never thought he would say again. "I'm here. I'm your father." The words felt heavy but also freeing. For the first time since his real family had been taken from him, he allowed himself to love again. And though the world outside was still cruel, Daniel knew one truth. He would give his life again and again to protect the daughter he had found in the ruins. The emotional breakthrough. The valley battle left Daniel weak. His wounds ached with every step, and though the girl did everything she could to help, he knew the road ahead would be harder. Still, he refused to stop, not while she was with him. They moved carefully, avoiding patrols and scavengers until they found shelter in an abandoned barn on the edge of a ruined farm. The roof leaked and the air smelled of mold, but it was better than open ground. Daniel collapsed against a wooden beam, exhaustion pressing on him like a weight. The girl hurried to his side, her small hands clutching a bucket of water she had fetched from a nearby stream. She dipped a rag into it and pressed it gently against his wounds. "Careful," he muttered, wincing. She nodded, her face serious. "I careful." "You hurt because of me." Daniel shook his head slowly. "No, I'm hurt because I chose to protect you." "That's not your fault." Her eyes filled with tears. "But I ran. I didn't listen. You told me hide." He sighed, remembering the moment she had stepped into the line of fire. Calling him father, it had nearly broken him with fear, and yet it had also saved him. "You gave me strength," he said quietly. "If you hadn't been there, I don't know if I could have kept fighting." The girl blinked, surprised. "I helped." He managed a weak smile. "Yes, you helped more than you know." The days inside the barn passed slowly. Daniel's wounds began to heal, though every movement was painful. The girl took responsibility for everything, fetching water, gathering firewood, even trying to hunt small animals with makeshift traps. Most of the time she failed, but her determination never faltered. Each night she curled beside him, whispering prayers to keep him alive. Daniel listened, silently touched. He had lived alone for so long that he had forgotten what it felt like to be cared for. Now every small act she did reminded him that he was no longer alone. One evening, as the sun set in a blaze of red and gold, the girl sat beside him, staring at the horizon. After a long silence, she spoke. "When you sleep, you call another name." "A little girl's name? Who is she?" Daniel's chest tightened. He had not realized his dreams betrayed him. He closed his eyes, swallowing the pain of memory. "She was my daughter. A long time ago." The girl's eyes widened. "What happened?" His voice was rough, broken. "She died. The war took her from me. I couldn't protect her." The barn grew silent. The girl reached out and placed her small hand over his. "That why you don't want me call you father?" Daniel nodded, his throat too tight to speak. She looked at him with quiet determination. "You think you fail again, but do you not fail me. You save me. Every day you save me." Her words pierced his heart. For so long he had carried the weight of guilt, believing himself cursed to fail anyone he loved. But here was this child, alive because of him, believing in him with all her heart. He turned to her, his eyes wet. "Why do you trust me so much?" She leaned against him, her voice soft but firm. "Because when I cry, you come. When I fall, you lift me. When I afraid, you stand in front. That is what fathers do." That night, Daniel could not sleep. Her words echoed in his mind. That is what fathers do. He stared at the broken roof above, watching the stars shine through the cracks. For years, he had lived as a shadow of himself, a man who walked only to survive another day. But now everything was different. This girl had given him a reason to live again. She had broken through the walls of his grief, showing him that love did not have to die with the past. In the quiet of the barn, he whispered into the night, words meant only for himself. "Maybe I can be her father. Maybe I already am." The next morning tested his resolve. Daniel woke to find the girl pale and shivering, her skin burning with fever. Panic gripped him. He had faced armies without fear, but the sight of her sick terrified him more than any battle. He rushed to cool her with damp cloths, whispering her name, begging her to stay with him. She opened her eyes weakly, her voice a faint whisper. "Don't cry, father." His chest tightened. He held her small hand, tears spilling freely. "I can't lose you. Not you." For hours he stayed by her side, feeding her water in small sips, praying silently, though he had long stopped believing in gods. Finally, as night fell, the fever broke. She stirred, her breathing calmer. Daniel exhaled in relief, his body shaking. He pressed his forehead against her hand, whispering, "You're my daughter. You always will be. I won't run from it anymore." Her eyes fluttered open and a small smile appeared on her lips. "I knew. I wait for you to say it." He laughed softly, wiping his tears. "You're too stubborn for your own good. Like you," she whispered before drifting back into sleep. As Daniel watched her, warmth filled his chest. The fear, the guilt, the loneliness, it all faded. For the first time in years, he felt whole. The emotional walls he had built had finally broken. He was not just a wanderer anymore. He was a father again. And with that truth, he found a strength greater than any weapon or armor. Whatever dangers still waited in the world, Daniel knew one thing with certainty. He would face them not as a man alone, but as a father with a daughter worth everything, the final acceptance. The morning air was cold and sharp as Daniel and the girl continued their journey. The fever had passed, but she was still weak. Daniel carried her on his back most of the way, her arms wrapped around his neck, her head resting on his shoulder. Every step hurt his wounded body, but he did not care. For her, he would walk across the ends of the galaxy. Days later, they reached the edge of human territory. Smoke rose in the distance, not from war this time, but from chimneys. Daniel's heart stirred. A settlement. A place where others lived, where safety might finally be possible. The girl lifted her head, her voice soft but hopeful. "Home?" Daniel hesitated. He had not called any place home in years, but when he looked at her smiling weakly, he nodded. "Yes, home." The settlement was small but alive. Wooden houses lined a dirt road and people moved busily between them. Farmers, hunters, children playing in the dust. The sight felt almost unreal after so much silence and ruin. But as Daniel entered with the girl in his arms, the people stopped to stare. Their eyes narrowed. Whispers rose. "Who's that?" "He's human." But the child. An alien? He brought an alien here? Daniel felt the weight of their judgment pressing on him. The girl clutched his shirt tightly, her eyes wide with fear. She had faced beasts and soldiers without breaking, but now the quiet rejection of strangers made her tremble. A man stepped forward, his voice cold. "We don't want her kind here. Leave her outside the walls." Daniel's jaw tightened. He placed the girl gently on the ground, then stood tall, his voice sharp. "She's not her kind. She's my daughter." "Her kind? She's my daughter." The crowd gasped. Some laughed bitterly. Others shook their heads. But Daniel did not move. He stood firm, his eyes blazing with conviction. "She's alive because of me. She calls me father, and I will not deny her. If you want me gone, then I'll go, but she stays with me. Always." The girl looked up at him, tears filling her eyes. She whispered, "You said it. You said I'm your daughter." Daniel knelt beside her, ignoring the murmurs of the crowd. He held her small hands, his voice soft but strong. "Yes, you are my daughter. Nothing in this world will change that." Her tears spilled over, but they were tears of joy. She threw her arms around his neck, sobbing into his chest. Daniel held her tightly, his heart full in a way it hadn't been for years. The silence of the settlement was broken by a single voice. An older woman stepped forward, her face lined with years of hardship. She studied the girl, then looked at Daniel. "You say she is your daughter," the woman said. "Then raise her as such. If you are willing to bleed for her, maybe we should not judge so quickly." Others murmured in agreement. Slowly, the crowd's hostility softened. Some still turned away, but no one moved to drive them out. Daniel bowed his head slightly. He knew trust would not come easily, but he didn't care. All that mattered was the girl's smile as she whispered again, "Home." Life in the settlement was not easy, but it was different from the endless wandering. Daniel worked, trading labor for food. The girl helped where she could, carrying small baskets, learning words from the local children. At first they teased her, but soon her laughter won them over. At night, Daniel would sit by the fire with her at his side. She would ask questions about the stars, about the past, about family, and for the first time in years, he answered with hope instead of silence. One night, as they watched the fire crackle, she leaned against him. "I thought I would be alone forever, but you came." Daniel wrapped an arm around her, pulling her close. "And I thought I would walk alone forever, but you gave me a reason to stop." She smiled softly. "We saved each other." He kissed the top of her head, his voice steady. "Yes, we did." Seasons passed, and their bond only grew. Daniel's wounds healed, but the scar on his heart healed more. The grief he had carried for so long was still there, but it no longer defined him. The girl had filled that empty space with laughter, stubbornness, and love. One day, as they worked in the fields together, she looked up at him with shining eyes. "You never say my name wrong anymore," Daniel chuckled. "That's because you made me practice," she grinned. "Because I'm your daughter." Daniel stopped, kneeling to meet her gaze. He placed his hands on her shoulders and smiled. "Yes, my daughter. Always." She threw her arms around him, her laughter echoing across the fields. And for Daniel, that sound was worth more than any victory, more than any survival. It was proof that love had returned to a broken world. The man who once wandered alone was gone. In his place stood a father, a man who had chosen to protect, to love, and to live not just for himself, but for the little girl who had called him father, until the day he finally said yes. And in that acceptance, they both found something stronger than survival. They found family.